Hello, and welcome to another edition of Coffee with the Curator. If you're a lover of Bradford history, and let's face it, who isn't, right? Huh? You've probably heard of Pig Island. It's that wonderful little spot that was located in Bradford about the 1880s. I'm being facetious, of course. It was a horrible spot. You could get murdered, you could get arrested, commit suicide, get stabbed, beaten up, all kinds of things. And that wonderful little spot called Pig Island. Today we're going to learn more about Pig Island and what made it so notorious that all the newspapers in the area warn people not to go there. It's Pig Island. Welcome to another edition of Coffee with the Curator. It wasn't a real island, of course, and that confuses a lot of people. As wide as the Tuna Creek is, it was never wide enough to have an island, especially with the population of Pig Island. It was located north of the main part of the city. Mechanic Street ran along one side, the creek ran along the other, and Globe Street, which you can see on this map, will become East Washington Street. That's where Pig Island is, or was, from about 1875 till around 1890. This map dates from 1890. But by the end of the century, Pig Island will have disappeared. There are actually very few photographs of Pig Island. This is the back of a stereo view card, photographed in 1879, and you can see number 18 says that there are 3 views of Pig Island. The landmark has 2 of those, which we lifted off the internet, and we're always looking for a third. This is one of those stereo views of Pig Island. Stereo views were always taken in pairs, and one side was slightly off from the other, so that when you look through it through a stereo viewfinder, it would appear to be 3-dimensional, just like those Viewmasters when we were children. Why did Pig Island exist? Well, following the discovery of oil in the Bradford area around 1871 or so, there was a tremendous need for workers. Soon a flood of men, many of them Civil War soldiers, drifters from big cities, or newly arrived immigrants from European countries, heard of Bradford and came here to find work. Oil brought money, and with money came loose women, con men, gambling, drinking, fighting, thievery, chicanery, and murder. And soon, Bradford was known not just as the oil metropolis of the North, but as Bad Bradford. John McLaren, a Harrisburg reporter who wrote Sketches in Crude Oil, and who was a frequent visitor to Bradford, wrote, "Bad Bradford combined in a single package the free and easy wickedness of Sodom and Gomorrah, Pithole, and Petroleum Center, with a dash of pandemonium thrown in for good measure." In 1882, Pig Island consisted of about 50 houses, and 48 of them were houses of prostitution. The other 2 were a Chinese laundry, owned by a man named Chris Lee, and a bottling works. Remember how I said that nearby towns warned people not to go to Pig Island? Well, here's what some of them said. The Potter Enterprise in Countersport called it the resort of abandoned characters. The Punxsutawney News said it was where scum lived in vile dens. The News Herald of Franklin, which is in Venango County, said Pig Island was one of the toughest spots on earth. I witnessed sights there I had never seen before or since. Bradford is in its glory, from the brothel to the gambling hell. The Williamport Sun-Gazette said, all the murders in Bradford occur on Pig Island, within 100 yards of each other. And a reporter from New York City called Eli Perkins visited the city. And this is his viewpoint. Every house is a wicked house. The street is hub-deep in mud. They say mud is mud and you can't get muddier, but go to Bad Bradford and you'll change your mind. The census shows 900 wicked women in Bradford, and the houses are usually labeled with a sign or a sash over the door. The names of these houses are these: Jenny's Home, the Good Shepherdess, Mary and Jenny, Clergyman's Retreat, the House of Sin, Anna's, the Old Oaken Bucket, Tin Pan Alley, the Derrick, and the Pig's Ear. Now those sound like wonderful places to visit. In 1870, the population of Bradford was about 900 people. By 1880, after the discovery of oil, it was 13,000. And many of those 13,000 came here to Pig Island for a good time. There are no photographs, at least no known photographs, of the women who lived on Pig Island, although you can see some of them in the photographs of the buildings. This is a sketch of a Victorian woman taking out one of her customers. There are many stories, of course, about Pig Island. One of them concerned Narrow Gauge Nell, who owned a home on the island, and it was raided by police on August 13th of 1878. Now that's early, even for Pig Island. 6 women lived in her house. Their names were Narrow Gauge Nell, Morphine Molly, Buffalo Baby, Petrolia Pete, Flat-Footed Martha, and Hognose Belle. Now, I'm just thinking Hognose Belle is probably not the prettiest woman on the island, but at least she had a job at Narrow Gauge Nell's. It turns out that the night before, a man from Jamestown named Abers had visited Pig Island and had ended up at Narrow Gauge Nell's house. He had a really good time. And when he got home that night, he found that his money had been stolen. $53, which is a lot in 1878. He went back to the house and found that the doors and windows were all locked. He yelled up at the house, and a soft, feminine voice, so said the Bradford era, called down to him and told him in a sweet voice, "We will blow your brains out if you don't leave." And they weren't kidding, folks. So he called the cops. The police came down to the house, where Buffalo Baby, remember her, strongly opposed the official entry and proved to be a baby in name only, kicking one of the officers and swearing loudly. All 6 women were locked up, and the man from Jamestown never got his money back. But oh, the memories. Headlines in the Bradford era constantly reported fights, suicides, gambling, drug overdoses, and arrests on the island. Violence and despair were commonplace. From 1879 to 1889 alone, the newspaper reported that a man named James Lavery was found dead in bed in a bagnio, which is Italian for brothel. Annie Brown overdosed on morphine. John Reedy shot his mistress and then blew his own brains out. John Ryan was garroted and robbed. A prostitute named Teresa Cole was accidentally shot. Sadie King drank herself to death on whiskey. Minnie Goodwin stabbed another woman named Rosa 6 times with a flat-bladed knife. Belle Graham, another working girl, killed herself. An oil field worker named Bob Hayne died of wounds from a bloody knife fight. And a town character named Pig Island Sandy was shot to death by a Bradford police officer. Good times of Bradford. And here's another story from the days of Pig Island. It happens June 4th of 1880. The scene is a physician's office in Bradford, and a man enters hurriedly. Hey, I didn't write this. This is what the era said, so let's go with it. "Doctor, you're wanted at Clara Palmer's on the island at once." "What's the matter?" "A man's been killed." The doctor grabs his surgical case and quickly threads his way through the crowd to Globe Street. Remember Globe Street from the map? Soon he reached the famous gilded palace of Diamond Clara Palmer. On entering the parlor, he found a man lying on a lounge whose face was a mass of cuts and covered with blood. Red-headed Clara was leaning over him, and in a half-sympathetic and more than half-alcoholic condition was consoling with him. The cause of the man's appearance was due to the fact that the gay and festive Clara had made him a target with a full bottle of beer, which, thrown the full length of the parlor, had landed square on his face and exploded. He was a sorry sight. After putting in 47 stitches, the doctor was called up to Clara's boudoir, where he found her in strong hysterics. On a small table lay a mass of diamonds, rings, pins, etc. After dosing Clara with a hypodermic injection of morphine, the physician examined the jewelry and could have walked off with the bundle undetected, as there was much excitement in the house, but he refused to be tempted. Yeah, sure he was refused to be tempted. Well, we'll never know, will we? I was reading a newspaper from the Titusville Herald about Bradford and Pig Island and the women there, and I found a reference to a woman named Frankie Meadows. The quote was actually, "We don't want another Frankie Meadows here." And I thought, what's up with Frankie Meadows? So I looked up her story, and it's an interesting one. It starts in July 2nd of 1884, on the island, of course. Frankie Meadows was described as the beautiful, shy daughter of a man who just happened to own a bar on Pig Island. This is what the newspaper said. 3 men entered the barroom of a disreputable house on Globe Street, in a section of Bradford known as Pig Island. The house is kept by a man who has a beautiful 20-year-old daughter named Frankie Meadows, of whom he is very proud. She is of modest demeanor and has always kept association from people visiting the saloon. As it happened, she was in the barroom today when 3 men entered, and one of them, named Joseph Head, age 35, began to insult her. She broke into tears, overcome with shame and anger, but recovering her self-possession, she ordered the men to leave the place. Head repeated his insulting proposals and closed by saying that if the girl felt herself insulted, she could revenge herself by shooting him. Hey, so she did. She sprang from the bar, pulled out a revolver that was kept in a drawer, and pointed it at Head, shooting him through the heart. She shot him dead. Now, in today's world, this would be called, quote, fake news, unquote. Frankie Meadows, first of all, was no shy flower. And she wasn't 20 years old, she was 27. In the barroom, she owned it. She had had a house on the island since the late 1870s and was well known to the police. You probably wonder what happened to Frankie Meadows after she shot John Head dead. Well, she was acquitted in March of 1886, left Bradford and moved to Warren, where I'm sure she owned another barroom just like the one on Pig Island. One of the worst houses on the island, or the best, was the shady side. This is one of the 2 photographs that we own, and it shows the shady side. Occupied by an assortment of women of all types and ages, the Bradford era wrote, "The shady side was built in the dim long ago, when Bradford was the warmest place on earth. It was always a resort of tough people. It was a place of fights, robberies, and drunken orgies on the part of dissolute men and women for many years." The Shadyside Hotel was located on the south side of the island, near present-day East Washington Street. And remember, it's called Globe Street back then. It was a 2-story, double-boarded house, and unlike most of the other buildings on the island, it was painted white with black shutters in an attempt to distinguish it from the other broken down, weather-beaten buildings and give it a dubious air of class. You could tell from this photograph it certainly does stand out. Upstairs at the shady side, the ladies of the night, a genteel name for prostitutes, they're also called the Sisters of the Cross of Shame, were always ready for business. Some of the better-known sisters were Minnie Stoddard, Lizzie Pert, who also went by the name Lizzie Hill, Lizzie Pratt, Lizzie McHugh, and Lizzie Williams. Lena Hudson, Boxcar Annie, French Louise, Eva Keck, and Dutch Annie. There was a poem written in 1956 called Sisters of the Cross of Shame. And I'm going to read the first two stanzas because they seem appropriate to Pig Island. The Sisters of the Cross of Shame, they smile along the night. Their houses stand with shuttered souls and painted eyes of light. Their houses look with scarlet eyes upon a world of sin, and every man cries, woe, alas, and every man goes in. In 1895, the city of Bradford decided that it had enough of these houses of ill repute, and they ordered them all closed by their owners. It was also said that gentlemen who ran gambling halls also closed their businesses. And many of the women left town. Many went to West Virginia, which was an opening oil field at the time. Minnie Stoddard, who was one of these women, would later return to Bradford and open another brothel off East Cordon Street called the Headlight. But that's another story. So what became of Pig Island, really? Ironically, its downfall was probably baseball. In October of 1889, with baseball becoming wildly popular in the United States, Bradford joined a newly formed interstate baseball league called the Iron and Oil League. The only problem was they didn't really have a good place to play. But Pig Island would be perfect. A baseball field close to town was a financial opportunity that required only one thing: Pig Island. And so the island property was purchased by a man named William H. Dennis in the mid-1880s, and he began systematically tearing down the older buildings and evicting the less desirable tenants. By 1890, Dennis had erected a ball field on the back part of Pig Island and put up a fence around the perimeter. But the Shady Side brothel and a few other buildings from the wicked Pig Island era still remained. He needed those buildings gone, but how? A fire can be a businessman's friend. 2 years later, at 4 a.m., a fire in February of 1892 destroyed the Shady Side and many other Pig Island houses as well. And while fires were common, especially in a town like Bradford, where the majority of structures are made of wood, this particular fire seemed oddly fortuitous. One old black woman, Annabelle Armstrong, who claimed to be 104 years old and had lived on the island, insisted that the fire had started in her house and that it had been deliberately set. She may have been right. It was reported that the ladies, again I'm being facetious, who still lived on the island, and there were several, although the days of bad Bradford had faded away for the most part, were all torn up with excitement, while old Mrs. Armstrong sat down on the sidewalk and bewailed her lot. Few women had insurance, and no one could rebuild. The working girls drifted off to other parts of the city, opening new bagnios on Newell Avenue, Toothpick Alley off Euclid Avenue, and in the Whitechapel district. The Headlight, a popular bawdy house run by the famous Minnie Stoddard, opened behind 84 Main Street. And that was the end of the wicked Pig Island. Ironically, 3 years later, Dennis closed the ball field and used the property to locate his next and far more successful enterprise, the tuna manufacturing company in Millwork. Most of us remember where that was, and when you went to see that business, you were standing on Pig Island. But old Pig Island had the last word. On October 14th of 1930, an old American bulldog-style revolver from the 1870s was found near Pig Island. The works were rusted away, the handle decayed to a mere frame, and the plating worn. But 5 bullets were still lodged in the cylinder, a fitting reminder of the wicked days of Pig Island.